Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairy Tales. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel. A cozy little corner of the, internet for narrative. If you are watching this live, you should know that there is a live chat and it's growing a little crop of potatoes, although in the summer it is a little quieter because people are out and doing things. But if you are not watching this live, then the great benefit you have is down in the description below. There will be timestamps for the stories we're reading, of which there are two. And both of them concern they both have three things in common. First of all, they are Cornish. Second of all, they are concerning a town called Padstow. And third, they are all about statues. And in that, they are collected together, the two stories. I don't really have much to say on them. They are pretty much, they're pretty straightforward, to be honest. Tales. Sometimes I do have to give some, like, reference or frame or whatever, but these are basically just little tales of things that apparently happened in the past in these areas. I see Uncle Kitty is in here, and Jumpstore in the here being the chat. And GS, hello folks, good to see you again. GS says, good evening, YouTube has shut down multiple times this week, so after many fixes, I hope it will keep going if I disappear. Well, that's too bad to hear, but it is good to see you in the chat. I'll say what I've said the last few times that we've talked about Cornish Folklore, because we've done a few this month from the same book, North Cornwall Fairies and Legends, which is, it's, in modern terms, it's, Cornwall is a place in the United Kingdom, but in historical terms, it is a part of one of the original sort of Celtic people, I guess would be the best term for that. And, sort of like, the famous ones being kind of like Irish and Scottish, but Cornish and Welsh and stuff are also in there. They are those people. And these tales have their own sort of traditions. It is actually rather impressive how much that region, despite being by most measures a pretty condensed region, can have such divergence between its historical cultures. So one of the more fascinating traits about the United Kingdom. But for our purposes, we're talking about Cornwall. Cornwall has a bunch of sort of tropes to it. One of the ones that we haven't engaged too much with is there's a lot of like King Arthur in it, which is true for a lot of English folklore as well, but in particular Cornwall. But also lots of what they call piskies. We'd probably think of as pixies, little people. Not always winged. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But little people, and we've read a lot of stories about those. But tonight's stories are not about the little people. It's not about the fairies, and it's not about King Arthur. Instead, tonight's stories is about statues. And for the most part, I'll be honest, they're anecdotes. They're not super rich, full tales. They're anecdotes, and they were ones for that reason that I've sort of avoided talking about for a while. But when we get to the middle of summer, when everyone's at the beach, and it's super hot in this room, and I can't talk for super long, then then it's a good time to talk about the more chill stories. Jumpstore is telling a tale about the family emergency, and it turns out it was just gas cramps. It's funny, I've heard that tale many times, of people believing that they were dying or had serious things, and it turns out it's gas cramps. And what it really is that gas cramps can hurt much more than anybody realizes until it happens. So you assume it must be something serious. Gas couldn't be this bad, but it really is. That's hilarious. Any good for, I mean, obviously that is humiliating for your cousin, but it's also very funny. Okay, because it is so warm, I'm going to try to trick myself by putting on a little bit of light rain and wind as our atmosphere for these stories. We'll see if it works. Our first tale of the night comes to us from a book called North Cornwall Fairies and Legends, which is a classic collection you can find for free basically anywhere online. And the tale that we're reading tonight is called Reefy, Reefy Rum, for reasons that will become apparent but never quite explained. A small girl called Nancy Parnell came down from Wadebridge to Padstow one St. Martin's summer to stay with her granny. The granny was old and weak in her legs, could not take her granddaughter out to see the sights of the little old world town, with its narrow streets and its ancient houses. So the poor little child had to go by herself. When she'd seen all there was to be seen in the town, she went up to look at the church, of which she'd heard from her mother, who was a Padstow woman, and the quaint little figures on the buttresses of the south wall. It was between the lights when she got there, but she could see the carved figures quite distinctly, which were a lion with its mouth wide open, a unicorn with a crown encircling its neck, and a young knight standing between them, holding a shield. And when she'd taken them all in, she repeated a funny old rhyme, which her mother told her she used to say when she was a little maid and lived at Padstow. The rhyme was as follows. Reefy, reefy rum, without teeth or tongue, if you'll have me now I'm a come. The rhyme, a taunt, and an invitation in one, was very rude, and so was the little girl who repeated it. But the lion, the unicorn, and the little knight did not take any notice of her, and looked straight before them as they had done ever since they were carved into that wall. But Nancy was somewhat afraid of the effect of the rhyme on these quaint little figures, especially on the open-mouthed lion, who had no sign of teeth or tongue. But she ran round the great square turreted tower and took refuge under the pentise roof of the gateway, and sat on the bench to see if they would leave their stations on the wall and come after her, but they did not. The little stone knight and the two animals had a strange fascination for the little Wadebridger, and the next evening again found her in the beautiful churchyard, gazing up at them with her bright child eyes, and as as I inhale my own spit. Give me a second. Gazing up at them with her bright child eyes, and as she gazed, she repeated that same rude rhyme. Reefy, reefy rum, without teeth or tongue, if you have me now I'm a come. But they took not the smallest notice of her, nor of her rhyme, and the young knight did not lift as much as an eyelash. But the child, now the rhyme was said, was even more apprehensive than ever of the effect it might have. And so she ran the tower again, and again took refuge in the old gateway, and again waited to see if they would come down from the wall and try to catch her. but they never came. And there is a picture here, which I will enlarge as I usually do. It's a rather well-drawn one. For those who can't see it so well, it is a young girl in what looks to be a sort of traditional gown with some ruffles. She is running with fear in her eyes, away from a unicorn, a lion, and a soldier with a shield. And you might be saying, well, why is she doing that? Well, let's find out. Weird, it bumped me way back. The last evening of her stay at Padstow, Nancy went once more to the churchyard to have another look at the figures and to taunt them with having no teeth or tongue. It was not quite so late as the first 2 evenings she had come thither, and the robins were singing their even song in the churchyard trees. Can you hear them? There they are. And as she stood staring up at the figures, a shaft of light from the sun setting between the trees fell across their faces, and the eyes of the little knight seemed to look down in sad reproach at the rude little maid as she again repeated the rhyme, which was even ruder than she knew. Her voice was shrill and loud and heard above the robin's cheerful songs. She had hardly finished the rhyme when she saw the lion move from his place on the wall, followed by the unicorn and the young knight, and come sliding down. She did not wait to see them reach the bottom, for she took her to her heels and ran for her life. But she could hear the figures carved in stone coming after her as she flew round the tower, and her heart was beating faster than the church clock when she reached the gateway. The gate, fortunately for her, was open wide, and she caught hold of it and banged it behind her as the lion with his gaping mouth came up to it. She looked over her shoulder, and as she turned to run down the street, and she saw the 3 figures all in a row. The young knight in the middle holding his shield, gazing at her through the round wooden bars of the gate. The lion looked savage, but for the brave little knight, with his pure young face, who seemed to have a restraining power upon both the animals. He might have broken the bars and come through the gate and made all small bones of the child who had invited them 3 times to come down and have her. The little Wadebridger ran back to her granny and told her about the rhyme she'd said to the little stone figure on the wall of the Padstow church. And now they come down and run after her to the gate. Her good old granny said it would have served her right if they'd broken the gate and got her. What a granny thing to say. "A lesson to you, my dear," she cried. "Never be rude to man or beast, especially to figures carved on church walls." Especially? I don't know about that. The 3 little stone figures stood all in a row on the gate step till the child was out of sight. And finding she did not return, they went back to their places on the buttresses of the grey old church. And there they are still. And as far as we know, have never left them since Nancy Parnell, the little Wadebridger, repeated Reefy, Reefy, Rum 3 times. And that was when our great-great-grandmothers were children. Now, our next story follows a similar sort of path, where it is very much kind of like a curious kid. I would say even less of consequence occurs. And it is interesting to me because a lot of the stories in this book, like this book is on the one hand, a collection of Cornish folklore, but on the other hand, it is the author's hand is more visible. You know, like one of the things with when you read something like Jürgen Hubert's collections, when we read from them, he's translating. Obviously, there is an art in that, and it requires some modification of the prose, but for the most part, he's trying to be very true to the prose. But a lot of collectors and translators of works, folklore works, were not so disciplined, especially in this era. Many of them took the stories they would collect and then kind of went off. You know, they made basically their own version of it, more suited to a novel standard. And as a result, you get good prose, but you can kind of tell because it has good prose. Because oral traditions focus on different things. You know, when you're reading, you can absorb more. You can keep track of more. When you're being told it, you have to keep like repeating names and themes in a way that would be kind of wearisome in written writing. So you can tell when an author's hand, when the translator's hand is on the work. And it's definitely the case with these stories. They're fairly fleshed out in a way that traditional oral folklore collections really aren't. That said, they still chose to include these two stories, so they must have found them significant. Like, they weren't just, this isn't just a work of history, is what I'm trying to say. So for them to be in there, obviously the author felt there was something more to them. I mean, the other one was, the one we just read seems to wear its heart on its sleeve, its moral on its sleeve. It's about being, you know, nice to people, I guess, or polite, probably more accurately. But this one, even more so, is just sort of a curiosity. I imagine it probably means more if this is a feature, which it's going to reference. There's a picture of it in here. Well, a drawing of it. If it was a feature that you'd seen before. Also, hello, Tammy. Good to see you. Sorry to hear it's hot. It's also hot here, which is why today is a short one. Uncle Kitty says, apparently Reefy means scabby. Yeah, the story goes out of its way to say that she doesn't even understand what she's saying, but that it's ruder than she knows. And, you know, there is an interpretation of the rhyme that's pretty rude. I won't do it for you, though. Okay. Our next and final story is called The Little Horses and Horsemen of Padstow. It also comes from North Cornwall Fairies and Legends, which is, of course, a collection that you can find just about anywhere by Ennis Tregarthen. And it also concerns little statues. And there they are. I assume real little horse statues in Padstow, but I've never been there, so I don't know. Maybe they're not there anymore. For those who can't see, it's just two simple sculptures on the top of a kind of brick cobblestone-y wall. Very simple drawing. At the bottom of the same old town, Padstow, there is a house which has two tiny little men on horseback on top of its roof. They've stood there for hundreds of years, and they never leave their place, save when they hear the great clock strike the hour of midnight. When it is said, they leave the red tiles and gallop across the marketplace through the streets of the little town. These gallant little horsemen have seen the house on which they stand almost entirely rebuilt, changed from an old world building with quaint windows and doors into quite a modern one. And they have the sorrow of knowing that the only things left that are ancient are the walls, the red tile bridge, their little horses, and themselves. Long generations of Padstow children have seen these quaint little men on horseback, and many a question have they asked concerning them, but the only thing they ever learnt was that whenever they hear that church clock strike 12 in the middle of the night, they come down from the roof, gallop round the market, and through the streets as we have just said. But the children are generally in bed at that late hour, and none were ever fortunate enough to see them do this wonderful feat. None except one, little Robin Kurgenvin. Tried to find a pronunciation guide on this name. It was obscure. Couldn't find it. I found AI guessing at it, and I didn't care for what AI thinks about anything. The son of a toy maker. And it happened in this way. One evening when Robin was about 9 years old, his father and mother went to a party. And as it was a party only for grown-up people, they left him at home asleep in bed. Now Robin slept as sound as a ringer till just before 12, when he awoke, finding he was alone in the house. He crept out of bed, opened the front door, which was under the roof, and went out and stood on top of an external stone stairway which led down to the marketplace. The house where he lived was as quaint and old as the one on which the little men rode so gallantly, and it faced it. And as he stood at the head of the steps of the church clock, the church clock began to strike the hour of midnight. Can you hear it? It had only struck 4 or 5 when he remembered that he had heard about those wonderful little horsemen and their steeds. And he looked across the market to see if what he'd been told about them was really true. He could see the house quite plainly, and the little horses and horsemen, for it was a clear night and full moon. The moment the clock had done striking, Robin saw, to his great delight, the 2 little men on their 2 little horses leave the housetop and leap into the street and go galloping round and round the marketplace, as his parents assured him they did when they heard that clock strike 12. And the little horses galloped so funnily, and the tiny riders sat so bolt upright on their quaint little steeds that Robin laughed to see them, and said they looked exactly like the wooden toy horses and horsemen in his father's shop. And as they went galloping and galloping that queer little gallop, he clapped his hands and cheered like a proper Cornishman. The tiny little horsemen took no notice of the excited boy on top of the stairs, and the moment they had finished their gallop round the old market, they came through a narrow opening at the foot of the stairs and galloped away up the street as fast as they could, small as they were. So excited was little Robin Kurgenvin when he saw the tiny horsemen gallop away that he flew down the steps and tore after them, and quite forgetting that his feet were bare and that he had nothing on save his little white nightshirt. He ran very fast, but fast as he ran, he could not overtake these swift little horses, and by the time he got to the bottom of Middle Street, they were nearly at the top. When they reached the head of that street, the tiny horsemen pulled up their horses for a minute outside an ancient-looking house with a porch room set on wooden pillars, and they turned up Workhouse Hill and disappeared. While Robin ran faster than ever before, and the tails of his nightshirt flew out behind him on the wind as he ran. And he never stopped running till he was halfway up Church Street, and when he saw the little horses and their riders galloping towards him, they had been to the head of the town and were returning, and he got on the footpath and stood near an arched passage and waited for them to pass. He did not have to wait long, and so fast did they come you would have thought they were galloping for a wager. They seemed to be enjoying their gallop through the streets of the sleeping old town amazingly, and Robin, as he fixed his bright young eyes upon them, saw, or thought he saw, a broad grin on their queer little faces, upright on their horses as they galloped by. And there's this delightful little picture of that. It shows what was described, which is the two little horses, no taller than the curb of the street, which is cobblestone, and the little boy in his nightgown and bare feet, clenching his hands together in delight, watching them ride past. The bare-footed little lad in his little night garment ran beside the quaint little horses and the little horsemen for a short distance. But they galloped much faster than he could run, and soon outdistanced him. And run as hard as ever he could not overtake them. But he heard the ringing of the tiny horses' hooves on the hard road as they went galloping down through town. When he reached the bottom of the town and the house where the little men and their horses usually stood, he glanced up, and to his surprise saw them standing on the tile ridge, looking as if they'd never left it. Robin gazed at them till he began to feel cold, and then he went back across the market to his own house. And half an hour later, when his father and mother came home from the party, they found him fast asleep on one of the steps with his toes tucked up under him. The funny little horses and the little horsemen did hear the clock strike 12 and galloped round the market and through the town, same as you told me, said Robin in a sleepy voice, when his father picked him up and carried him into the house. I saw them with me own eyes, and I ran after them up as far as Church Street. They galloped so funnily and so fast. I'm glad I saw them. So am I, said his father, laughing, thinking his small son had dreamt it as he lay asleep on the step. You are the first little chap who ever saw them come down from the roof and gallop, and I fancy you will be the last. Little Robin Kerrigan may have been the first to see them gallop, as his father said, but he may not be the last. For the quaint little horses and horsemen are still on the roof of the house, and it is told that they still gallop through Padstow streets and round what once was the market when they hear that church clock strike 12. Zevia, the distilled disappointment that you've come to expect. Uncle Kitty says, Cornish folklore is surprisingly mild. I mean, these stories are very mild. I will agree with that. That's why I sort of left them for the quiet times of the summer. But I don't know for sure if that's a Cornish thing or if that's just this collection, because I've not read beyond this collection. And it's very possible that this was a collection angled towards kids. Oh, Jumpstore is talking about her birthday. Did I know that? Maybe I did. No. I don't remember if you told us, but happy birthday, Jumpstore. I hope it's been a good year for you. Tammy says, well, thank you for the stories, Rory. It was short, but they were good. Hope everyone has a wonderful and cooler night. Yeah. Sweet dreams. See you next week. Jumpstore joining me in on slagging on Zevia. By law, upon purchase, you can't sue us for any regrets you may have towards life once you drink it. Yeah. As I said at the beginning, it's hot. And when it's hot, the stories are short. So we'll be back next week. If it's cooler, we'll do a longer one, try and make up the difference. But for now, 30 minutes is about as long as we can go. My back feels like it's leaning against an oven. For whatever reason. Oh, Jumpstore says, by the way, I saw your previous stream. Thank you for thinking of my jokes. Yeah, I thought of it when I was reading them, that story in the first place. And when you were like, had to go, I was like, oh, that's a shame. You would have had fun with it. Well, anyhow, thank you everybody for coming by and for watching. And if you're out there lurking, thank you for your lurk. I hope your summer is good. I know that most people don't watch streams in the summer, so I expect it to be lower numbers. But if you do wind up watching it, thanks for choosing to spend some of your summer with me. As for me, I will keep the fire going, and we pretend that this fire is cold, because it is super hot. You folks, have yourself a good sleep.